Well, ladies and gentlemen, we are indeed live. I didn't want to interrupt the very important conversation about what we're eating during quarantine. So this segment is Thursday, May 21st. And it's been 2 months since we've all been sheltering in place. And we started to pivot and bring to you Bella Vista TV. And one of the reasons why we did this is because up at Bella Vista Social Club and Caffe, we meet the most amazing minds on a daily basis. And we're very excited because our guests today are two of those minds that we see pretty much every day. So we have with us the amazing Dr. Corina Antal and her husband, Dr. Jean Yao. So Corina's with Salk Institute and Dr. Jean Yao is with UCSD, and also he's housed his Yao labs at the Stanford Consortium. With me today, I have Alexis Dixon and Steve Chappel, my co-hosts and partners in crime. So thank you guys for taking time to come on today. And I know we got started a little late, and I apologize. It's all Dr. David Brenner's fault. So write it down. We're going to blame it on Dr. David Brenner. And I said he owes me, but I actually owe him a birthday cake since I took his cake. So I think we're even now. Thank you guys so much for coming on.
It's our pleasure.
Yeah. So you're getting delivery right now for food. That's how you're surviving?
Yes, we're surviving on food delivery. Our friends have been delivering food. His lab got us a food delivery service as a baby shower gift. Yeah. So it's been great since we have two newborns at home with us.
Two additions, yeah.
Two additions.
The episode, I don't think that was brought out. You have two newborn twins. Wow.
Yeah, newborn twins. They've both been home just for 2 days now. So this is day 3 of having both of them home. One came home with, about 4 or 5 days before the other from the NICU, the neonatal intensive care unit. Now we have both of them, and we're learning how to handle them both.
It's extraordinary because you two are known as one of the main power couples up at Bella Vista and around the Torrey Pines Mesa. And now, we've been following you both individually with your labs and the research work you've done, and following you when you got engaged and you got married and then you were pregnant. And now what is it like having, well, first of all, twins, right? That's just not having a kid, that's having twins. And they're very special twins. And then having twins during COVID, during a pandemic.
Well, everyone says that Jean only does things in high throughput, so you want straight for 2. No need for just 1 at a time.
I think this is the 4th set of twins from my lab or lab members. Wow. So in the last maybe 4 or 5 years,
there's something in the water at Stanford Consortium. Beware, people, beware.
Maybe they'll attract younger researchers,
I mean, it's exhausting, but really rewarding, right? And I think for folks that have kids, I get it, right? I get it now, I guess more than ever, how amazing this journey of becoming a parent, and you start trying to imagine their futures, right? And I got to say, during this time of COVID, it's a very different future that I had in mind for them, right? Because maybe 4 or 5 months ago I would have said, when they're out, our friends can visit, our families from Singapore can visit, Chicago, Romania, right? But now it's quite different. And then moving ahead, things may stay a little bit unusual for a while, and then scientifically, even thinking further ahead, these viral pandemics may appear more frequently over time. So that really changes the game, right? Even going to get food at Bella Vista, where we miss the restaurant, but we can't even go out, right? So it's a different situation at this point. I think that's it's food for thought, right?
Yeah. Before we get
epidemics, do you have a sense of that? And maybe we should have a sense of what you two do for our wider audience. 'Cause it's quite amazing, both of your labs.
Sure. Yeah. So at the Salk Institute in Ron Evans's lab, I work on pancreatic cancer. And, it's pretty terrible disease. It's going to be the is predicted to become the second leading cause of cancer-related death in the U.S. Even though it's pretty rare, it's very deadly. About 10% survival rate over a 5-year period. So we're trying to find better ways of targeting pancreatic cancer. We work with MD collaborators and different funding sources to do small clinical trials so we can have an impact, on patients directly. But we do in the lab the fundamental research that leads to these clinical trials that we do.
Awesome.
Yeah, and
so my lab works on trying to get a better understanding of how genes, no pun intended, are regulated in cells, and there are different ways in which genes can be controlled. And one of the ways we really focus on is how genetic information in the genome gets transferred to RNA, which has been thought to be an intermediate before you generate protein for a long time. But it turns out RNA has many surprises. They can control gene expression directly as well. We try to understand how the life cycle of an RNA molecule from birth to death in the cell relate to different diseases, neurodegeneration like ALS, Parkinson's, Alzheimer's disease, and also now in cancer. And we try to understand how to build ways to use our understanding of RNA biology to develop new therapeutics for some of these different diseases. And actually we are, as a lab, very interested in translating some of our basic research findings into commercial entities to then develop drugs or products for the wider community, for patients, for other RNA, other pharmaceutical companies. And then as the last leg of the lab, we try to model diseases that have an RNA basis, which also includes autism and as well as these age-related diseases, right? Using iPS cells and mice models and so on. So we work on basically to summarize, we work on using building new models to understand RNA-related diseases, trying to develop therapeutics based on our basic understanding of RNA biology, and then try to communicate and provide this information to the wider audience in the world, right?
As a result, go ahead. No, go ahead, Steve.
You have some major companies that have come out of that. Is that true?
Yeah, I've been very fortunate and very lucky to have had strong collaborators, very strong ex-students and ex-postdocs in my lab that have a very entrepreneurial spirit. And together with them, we've been able to build companies in San Diego and contribute to companies outside of San Diego. And so one of these companies, actually two of them in San Diego, one is Eclipse Bioinnovations, developing RNA genomics tools and platforms that really enable RNA medicine. And the other company is Locana, which is a company that is a RNA targeting company using different proteins and methods to target RNA related to severe diseases like myotonic dystrophy, ALS, Huntington's disease. And both have done well, albeit they had different paths. Locana took a venture-led path for financing and for management, and I've had the great fortune again, and it's such an honor to be working with folks like Tom Daniel in San Diego. He used to be a major and still is a major player in biotech, cell gene, and so on. And he's been a mentor and a friend, chair of the Locana board of directors, and he's been such a great force in trying to push our basic research into the clinic and giving us sort of experience and ways to do that. And Eclipse did a what I call a bootstrapping, bootstrap a solution here. We raised some money from NIH to build a company, and then basically built the rest of the company on the revenue generation, where we have products and kits and services that we provided to different companies and different academic labs, including labs at UCSD and so on. And through that have identified new products that we're developing, trying to really capture the entire space of RNA biology, right? And all the different products in that area. So we've been very happy to be doing this in San Diego. It's a great place to do that. Yeah. And through all that process, Corina hasn't killed me yet. So
that's because
I need him to take care of the twins.
yeah, that's the only reason. Yeah.
It doesn't sound like you guys are very.
High five, Corina. High five on that one.
So how
Get a picture of those twins at some point. I mean, not a picture, but maybe you move over. We can see they're real. Wow.
Yeah. I mean, they are.
We can pick them up and bring them on. They like to be held, so they should be pretty.
They're so
Their first
cute.
TV appearance.
So cute.
Yeah.
Just grab
Yeah,
them.
really,
Grab one
their
of them.
first TV appearance.
Yeah.
That's cool. How has COVID accelerated or slowed the research you're both doing? What has been the impact on COVID-19 on your research?
Yeah. So for me, actually, maternity leave started right about the time that COVID kicked in. And so, I'm fortunate enough to have, technician help. I was able to still do some experiments remotely through my technicians from the hospital. But yeah, I'll let Jean talk about how this whole pandemic has sort of added a new extra dimension to his lab work. And
Right, because those are RNA tests. I mean, for the lay media.
Yeah, exactly. Right.
so
RNA.
yeah, so this is Miss. Yeah, this is Emma.
You can never really tell
Emma.
who-
No, I can tell. This is Emma. I have to look at them from the front. I can't tell from the
Just mark them with felt tip
And
pens.
because they're identical twins, right?
They're identical.
They're
twins.
monochromatic.
No.
twins.
Monochorionic monoamniotic. Yes,
Okay.
momos for short.
Momos.
I'm not
Yeah.
looking.
Where? About 1 in
Should
60.
I say monochromatic? And I don't know science.
Yes, they're very, very rare, unique, because of this chorionic monoamniotic. Hi.
Yeah. So while Corina is distracted, maybe I can chip in. Knowing that they were going to be premature, and knowing that Corina had because we have this a very difficult set of twins, Corina had to go to the hospital for ultrasounds every other week.
Yeah.
And this all happened throughout COVID, right? Or the COVID process. So knowing that there was this large vulnerability in our life, and then also the lives of my students and postdocs, it's going to be a danger to work in, to be outside publicly and all that. Also considering, I'm very close to Singapore. My family is there, and Singapore had one of the earliest spikes in the number of cases after China. So knowing all of that, we had forecasted that the U.S. Would be hit pretty early. Sometime in February, we were already nervous, thinking about how to use our expertise somehow. And as it happened, sometime in March, there was this burst of fear. And I think it was actually a bit late in the U.S. People reacted pretty late. Leadership in the White House, I think, reacted a little bit late. But given all that, we just asked ourselves, what can we do? And so one of the things we wanted to do was to rapidly create a community to drive more awareness, right, of the virus in San Diego. And so what we did in my group was to stand up a workspace initially for actually Stanford Consortium members to just provide information, to sort of share responsibilities. If somebody had to go to lab but was ill, can someone else help? If the kids had to be home because schools were shut, feel free to post this message online and have someone else help you do that. But then that was the initial intent. But then it spiraled very quickly into almost 900 members joining this workspace over the course of three or 4 weeks. and everything was being discussed. It was, a lab needed protective gear because they're working on COVID. Can someone else provide that? And so this served as a messaging board to get that information out. Someone needed nasopharyngeal swabs because the hospitals were running out for swabbing patients to do viral RNA testing. Then we started, can we find solutions, right? So then we would post things out and connect the people that can actually generate solutions. Some of the engineers at Rady's, of my friend and colleague Nicole Kufel started, running a project to get engineered 3D printed engineered nasopharyngeal swabs, right? And that became really successful. Rady's bought a whole bunch of these. I think the Department of Health in California bought a whole bunch of these. And then, so this sort of spiral, right? And then we realized that now we had to have a community of 900 over, now almost 1,000 over scientists across all of San Diego, right? All in one place. Can we help speed up? All right. Can we help speed up viral RNA testing? And really, the assay itself isn't very complicated based on all the things that a lot of the labs have already done, right? And so we started, gathering information on who would have the right skills or already experience on automating or scaling up this process of viral RNA testing. And so Louise Laurent in our building and a colleague of ours had already scaled up some of the qPCR parts. Rob Knight, on campus had scaled up some of this RNA extraction, and folks at Scripps, Kristen Anderson, epidemiologist, right, had already sort of did testing in his lab, at a smaller scale. Can we all gather our resources together and expertise and build up a research study to do epidemiology measurements across campus? And very quickly, we had the ability to scale up to about 2,000 to 3,000 tests a day. Wow. To ask what is the infection rate of COVID in San Diego, right? And so
you're very much ground zero at that most important part of the testing for COVID, and it's
yeah, exactly. And I think again it was such a great experience because Louise, Rob, Christian, Lauga, Farnese at Rady's Children's Hospital, Nicole Kufel. I mean, great minds, right? And it was so fun to work in such a fast pace. Within 2-3 weeks, we had the workflow set up. We had Lauga had individuals at Rady, the clinical staff there. So supportive, the CEO, right? So supportive to help get staff to put up pop-up clinics, test sites, where people can drive through and get a swab. And within 2 minutes, they get a swab, and then overnight they get results, right? And the results are not really there meant for a clinical action, but more for us to understand what is the infection rate, what is the prevalence. And then it turns out that everywhere around the country, viral RNA testing was scarce, right? Uh-huh. And then you see in China, Wuhan was doing 11 million tests, right? And then they could do in Rutgers in New York, they were trying to do 10,000, 20,000 tests a day, right? And it became clear that when we looked around, we had one solution. Now there are other solutions as well. And so my lab, we do not work on virology, right? We never historically did that. But because of this, to answer your question, because of COVID, we are starting to work on virology. We're starting to build ways to develop screens to repurpose molecules that can target COVID-19. Help support rapid testing at scale. The meeting at noon, which is why we had to postpone, was to talk to David, and David wanted to see where we are in this process, and I think this is a good sign, right? The community has gotten together because there's really no option, and it's been great. So COVID has been bad in general for the world, but there are silver linings here, yeah. And I think that.
Do you think, Gene, that having already been part of a collaboratory at the Stanford Consortium helped pave the way for you and all the others that came on board to make it happen so fast, rather than other institutes in other parts of the world or in different parts of our own country?
I think I would argue that broadly speaking, UCSD in San Diego is a very special place. I think that we do not have boundaries and think about, I belong to this, at least I don't think about it. I belong to this department or that department, or I belong to UCSD versus not, right? I think that faced with, one would argue, a common enemy, there should be no boundaries or walls to divide us, right? And I think being in Stanford, at the Stanford Consortium, it's already a collaboratory, right, with different institutes involved in tackling diseases using stem cell models. And so I think this was a very, as you mentioned, a very natural extension to that. But in this case, even broader, right? Because it is not just about a certain set of diseases, but it's about everyone's health.
Where are we on testing, do you think? I mean, because you have a sense of the penetration of COVID and the testing. What we read in the media, is that underestimating the number of cases, the lack of tests, or what do you think? It's like 115,000 tests, I think, done in San Diego.
I think the number of tests needed to really open up the country, and I would say San Diego needs to be much higher. It really depends on how you think about the problem, right? One would argue, how often is testing required? And if the answer is every day for the same individual versus once a week versus once every month, then that volume is completely different, right? So if you have 1 million people tested once a year, that's 1 million tests. If 1 million people, tested, once every other day, that's a whole different number, a whole different magnitude. And what is the right answer? I think it's not clear yet. But I can tell you, just from our very personal experience, we are fortunate enough to have nurses at the NICU take care of our kids. And in my mind, I was like, I hope that they're being tested very frequently, correct? Because they're taking care of our premature kids. And then when we got home, we were also very fortunate to be able to acquire some help, doula that will come in the evening. And again, in my mind, I'm like, please let me know you're social distancing. And if I had the bandwidth and resources and they were okay with it, I would test them every day, right? Because this is like our lives. Right. So I think it's all about like how you see things, right? And how you perceive the immediate danger. And then of course, economics, right? If the tests per sample cost wise drop further and further and get low enough, then it's the way I think about it is if it's cheaper at least by several fold from a Starbucks coffee which you have every day, that's my price point. I can do a test to make sure that our lives are safe every day, right? And then the other point is how comfortable is it? Right now we do nasopharyngeal swab. But many other groups, Rutgers, for example, has a saliva test that has an EUA, and then folks like Louise and Rob are trying more innovative solutions. So this is a good thing. And so, do we have enough tests now? I don't think so. Can we get to where we need to go? Yes, but I think it requires concerted leadership. And I'm not talking like just our local, leadership, right? I'm talking about leadership of the country, and I think that's worldwide, right? Because you need to be coordinated, right? You don't want one country to open up and be safe, and then other countries will have to people have to visit that country anyway. So it's a global solution that's required.
Yeah. What do we know about the virus now that we didn't 2, 3, 4 weeks ago? I mean, what do we know today? If we were looking at it right now, what do we know now definitively? And of course it will change, but what do we know about it now that we didn't a few weeks or a month ago?
Yeah, so there's been a lot of exciting research being done and published. The rate of publications in this area and this for COVID has been astounding, right? Also another way of showcasing how important and rapid progress has been. people have now discovered that many of these viral proteins, a group in Seattle, right, and UCSF has identified that many of these proteins have other proteins in the host cell, which is human cells, that come in contact with it. So the viral proteins are expressed, but you have other proteins come in contact with it. Many of these are actually proteins we study day in, day out that impact other diseases, neurodegeneration, oncology, and so on. So that's been surprising and exciting, right? Many of these are RNA related proteins. So maybe there's a way that we can use our skill sets to impact this. Others are finding out that actually mutation rates are not on the virus is not extremely high, which is good, which means that a vaccine could be possible because of the low mutagenic rate.
She agrees.
So tiny.
Yeah.
How much do those babies weigh? How much do they weigh?
How much? Well, so she, Emmy weighed 1.4 kilograms when she was born. So that's what, 2 point, what was it, how many pounds? No, 3 point something pounds.
Yeah.
Sorry, we're in grams right now.
3.5 or something like that.
Yeah. But they've grown quite a bit since. So
seems like they have a direct source of nutrition.
Yeah. And Jean's been overfeeding them as well.
Yes.
As soon as they came home from the hospital, they started they
double.
They almost doubled their the amount.
When they cluster feed, that's when you're like, what's going on?
Yeah, exactly.
Corina, when they were talking about, I think, and I know I want to get to talking about science with you as well, but I don't know science very well, so I'm going to ask a mom question before we turn to science. Jean, like Jean was saying, you bring in extra help. It's the pandemic. You have 2 kids, and they're twins, and they're tiny, and they're preemies. And then you have to even worry about the people that are coming in to help you if they're social distancing and right. The trust that you're placing in them. So I think it's a big issue, just trust, as we're moving forward and people are asking, are you going to open up? Are you going out? This and that. It really comes down to surrounding yourself with people that you trust.
For sure. And I think part of
contract.
Yeah. And I think part of it was also, we had been maybe social distancing and like literally not having left the house except to, go out for walks for like a month before I went into the hospital to give birth. And so, all the groceries that came in, everything we would sanitize, we let them sit for a few days to make sure everything was, the virus, would have been inactivated by then. And as soon as I went into the hospital, I lost control of everything, right? Like people were bringing me prepped food. There were nurses and doctors coming in on a regular basis.
Early on, not everybody was masked.
Yeah, early on, not everyone was wearing a mask.
I think the rules were very in flux.
Yeah, exactly. And, people would rush in the middle of the night because, baby's heart rate was dropping or something and maybe didn't get a chance to put on a mask right away, right? And so I sort of had to kind of relax my standards about it and just, hope that everything would be fine. I mean, the hospital, they would come and sanitize everything. And eventually when the, sort of rules changed, everyone would wear a mask and they would sanitize, wear gloves and everything. So, I started feeling more and more comfortable, but I just sort of had to not worry about it as much because, I had other things to worry about. So yeah, that's sort of been an interesting transition. Yeah. So now we just have to, trust that the help that we get, that the people who are helping are doing social distancing and protecting themselves in order to protect us.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And what's going on in your lab? I think I heard Salk was slowly not opened up completely, but they really scaled back to skeleton crew. Right. I know Rusty Gage is the leader there, and you're with the Ron Evans lab, correct? Mm-hmm. Okay. Yeah. And so how's that working? Are they working in shifts or?
Yeah, so, up to now, they've sort of been in what they call maintenance mode. So anyone who was sort of doing who had started certain experiments that were, long ongoing, maybe mouse experiments that have been going on for a year or so. Those experiments were allowed to continue, given that, provided that you had people that were maintaining a safe distance, you only were allowed to have a certain number of people per lab coming in shifts. And so there was a schedule that went out weekly where people would sign up to go and, either take it from mice, their cells, or do experiments that were, deemed to be essential. And there was a committee that would approve these, essential experiments. Now they just sent out an email recently that they sort of want to go phase in, bringing in more people, more shifts in a safe way. They've been providing, PPE for people, requiring masks and, everything, making sure that people are keeping a safe distance, but allowing more people to sort of come in and continue the science, because we've sort of been slowed down or completely stopped for a couple of months now. And, it's with these types of experiments, you sort of need to ramp back up.
Right.
We're studying cancer. The pancreatic cancer patients are still suffering. And so we have to continue all this research and everything else that goes on at the Salk. It's all very important research. But,
and you're an outdoors person, right? So I know Jean and the both of you, like, you go rock climbing and you're always outdoors and very connected with nature. And your background before you landed at Salk, you were, why do I think, if I remember correctly, weren't you like swimming with sharks or?
Yeah. So
like,
an undergrad,
ninja scientist.
Yeah, I majored in marine biology, and so I was working with sharks. We would go out at night and catch and tag sharks to look at sort of the population dynamics. Yeah, before I came to UCSD for my Ph.D. in Biomedical Sciences, and so we haven't been outside much. Like really going to my appointments initially, and then going to the NICU daily to see the twins. We haven't really gone outside. And so,
wait, you were working with sharks at night? You mean out of Scripps Oceanography, or?
This was the University of Miami in Florida.
Oh, I see. That's right.
Yes.
Because there are very few sharks in Bulgaria, right?
Romania. There are no sharks in the Black Sea, as far as I know. But, so.
Didn't we have you in a major STEAM leadership program, Women in Biotech, over at the Salk with this?
Yes.
Yeah,
that was a couple years ago. Yeah,
I'll have to come back with the babies. That'll shock the girls in the audience. It's all girls. Okay. STEAM Leadership Series had to make that plug, but you were our keynote speaker.
Yeah.
Where did your passion for science come from? You're from Bulgaria.
Romania.
Yeah, sorry.
I apologize.
Neighbor to Bulgaria.
Yeah. Were your parents scientists? Where did your passion for science come from?
My dad's a chemical engineer. My mom is an accountant. So, I think, partially my dad influenced me, working in chemistry. And then, I got into marine biology because I took a class at the Shedd Aquarium in Chicago. They offered an off-site class while in high school. So I got to skip my math class to go to an aquarium once a week. So that was sort of like... It was just by luck that I took this class and got really interested in marine biology, and then went and did my undergrad in marine biology. And then I did a summer internship where I thought I'd be working on marine biology related topics. And it turns out the PI was working on some obscure human disease. So I got interested in exposed to molecular biology, realized I really liked it. And that's when I decided to apply to UCSD to get my PhD there in Biomedical Sciences. And then I was there with Alexandra Newton working on protein kinase C in cancer. So that was sort of how I entered into the cancer field. After that, my mom actually had triple negative breast cancer and passed away from breast cancer. So I kind of wanted to work on a cancer where I could have a bigger impact, where, it was a difficult to treat cancer. such as triple negative, and pancreatic cancer was one of those. And so I joined Ron Evans's group at the Salk to work on pancreatic cancer, where we're trying sort of a different approach to target pancreatic cancer. So we know the mutations that cause the cancer, but this hasn't really led to any durable diseases. It's difficult to target, durable treatments for this disease. I'm still a bit sleep deprived. Instead of trying to target these mutated genes that lead to pancreatic cancer, what we're doing is we're targeting the epigenetics that are driving pancreatic cancer. So epigenetics is sort of what makes the difference between, let's say, your skin cell and your brain cell. They both have the exact same genomic DNA. Okay, Rusty Gage would probably say the almost exact same, but the same genomic DNA. But it's the epigenetics, how these genes are upregulated and downregulated and expressed is what determines their cell fate and makes one cell a skin cell and one a brain cell. So
I think these babies are going to be pretty smart. What do you think, Anna? Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah. So we're trying to target these epigenetic networks that are misregulated in pancreatic cancer that take a normal pancreas cell and convert it into a cancer cell. So we're trying to target these in order to treat pancreatic cancer. So that's sort of our approach to this disease.
Is it true that sharks don't get cancer? Do they even have pancreases?
I've heard that.
Yeah, there is a low incidence, but I do believe that that's just a myth.
Yeah.
They do get cancer.
Okay.
It might be lower prevalence because
they don't live as long in the wild.
They don't live as long, but also they live in cold waters. And I don't know. I'm not an expert in shark cancer or sharks anymore by any means.
I just thought there might be some breakthroughs here, given your disparate background.
Can you talk a little bit about cold water as a therapy? I mean, you said it's because they live in cold water, and there's been a lot of talk about the benefits of this. What is that? Is there any scientific proof or research around that at all?
Yes, I'm not too familiar with that, so I don't want to speculate too much, but I would presume that having a lower metabolism would lead to having fewer like reactive oxygen species and things like that could be a precedent for cancer. So for example, they say that eating less can lead to a lower incidence of cancer because you're metabolizing fewer nutrients, therefore you have fewer reactive oxygen species and lower chances of accumulating mutations. So that's probably where they're going with that angle. But I'm not aware of any research that shows that cold water therapy has cured any.
The Icelandic shark, no kidding, is one of the longest lived creatures in the world, and the shark, it lives 200 or 300 years. Think about that. But it doesn't have time either. It's kind of chilly up there. But listen, maybe we ought to get back to COVID here for a second, because we have like one of the world's greatest experts, or maybe two here on all that. So is San Diego opening up too soon? Is that kind of the wrong kind of question to ask? Or?
Well, I mean, it's a tight balance, right? Because for economic reasons, you do want the country to reopen.
Yeah.
And also just, mentally, so, psychologically, it's probably important to re-engage with the community. But it's a balance between that and then how safe is it? Well, the good news is that so far, at least in San Diego, the prevalence has been lower, much lower than in New York, right? And in Boston. And I think part of that may be due to social distancing happening a little bit faster here.
People being more spread out than they are in New York.
People maybe driving, more because public transportation is terrible. Maybe so. Part of that, right, is that I think people are a bit more, a bit safer because of the way we live. So that being said, because the prevalence is so low, one could make the strong argument that things are working out. Let's ease into reopening, right? However, my like if you think about what are the conditions in which it would be completely safe to do that, right? To me, some of the conditions would be we have more tests available, cheap or free, easy access to these tests, where employers and insurance companies have decided how they would conduct and deploy information with from their employees when they take these tests. I would argue that there should be a bit more structure in plans and in what do we do if someone violates social distancing, gets infected, doesn't want to take the test, and then infects other people, right? So some of these questions, I think, to me at least, is not so clearly articulated, and the answers are forthcoming yet, right? Right. And so it's a little bit like what is the analogy? Like trying to build the airplane while flying in it, right? and I think that's dangerous. But I can also see the economic downside of not opening, and also safety, right? Or reopening hospitals. You have to reopen hospitals. People are sick, independent of COVID, right? And so you have to get people back to work. You have to get students back to school. You cannot hit pause forever, right? And so you have to make a decision. And I think having a low prevalence, low incidence would be good. Is good as any at this point. In the meantime, I would argue more resources poured into basic research, translational research for COVID, diagnostic tools, and then thoughtful leadership in how to implement these new technologies into rapid testing, mass at home maybe tests, right? Would be important.
Tracking people,
contact tracing. Contact tracing. I think all that is important.
People are afraid to do because they're afraid of the invasion of privacy, right? I mean,
right. They're afraid of the invasion of privacy, but they're also afraid of what that means for their job prospects, right? So if you envision that let's say you find out that you're positive, but you're relatively fine. You're just, you're asymptomatic, but you're infectious. But you really, really need this job, right? Is there a danger for folks that still would go to work because they need the financial opportunity and income, right? But in doing so, do affect other people. Well, then as Amanda said, that's a social contract. But then it gets beyond that, right? Well, at some point, will there be a legal contract here?
Right, a ramification. Right? And as employers too, right? I always say as employers, like it's this, it weighs on you morally. Like, oh, you want to be able to provide employment, jobs, but at the same time, like, what is the cost? Right, and then looking further ahead, at some point, more and more people will have been infected. Some will have gotten, people that have survived may have gotten acquired immunity to the virus. Mm-hmm. It's not so clear yet how long the immunity is, how durable it is, right? But let's say you get immune, you can take serology tests to illustrate that. But then you have now two. Well, I would argue two groups of people, right? Three groups, right? People that are infected and have survived and are now immune. People that are infected and are not doing well and not going to survive, right? And then people that are not infected yet, right? So in terms of the workplace, you may have two groups of people that can work. One can only work at home because they are not immune yet, and ones that are immune, so they could come to meet other people at work. Do you pay them the same amount? And so that brings up like social, social disparity or discrimination. It's very interesting, right? And also very that's not tackled yet. And so I would argue, reopening early is great, but if all these issues are not tackled, then we are really tackling things on the fly, which maybe is the way to go. But I'm not a politician or
You have close ties to Singapore, right? Maybe you should say what those are, but they have thought through some of these things. What do we have to learn from Singapore, or for that matter, Germany or South Korea?
Or Sweden.
Or Sweden, right? So, I mean, I think general lessons so far has been contact tracing has been very, very important. But contact tracing without enforcement is not that useful, right? So if you contact trace and you find out, in the dorms, students may live 2 or 3 in the same dorm room. One person is positive, while the other 2, based on contact tracing, should immediately go get tested, right? So that's really important because you can quickly prioritize who gets tested. But is there also a downside, right? Someone can get discriminated, right? But then if you don't enforce this testing, you just have the information that the other 2 may be exposed, but not do anything about it. You don't make it mandatory to get tested. Isn't that more dangerous, right? So Singapore has had a very strong government, and so they said if you're positive, first of all, testing is free. We do it all the time. There's even talks about, can we test 6 million people in Singapore, a very small, right, country? Can you test 6 million people once every week? Every week, 6 million people, one shot, right? And can you do that? And then can you then contact trace, and they do that and they enforce. So for example, my sister lived in LA until maybe a month ago. And all the Singapore government said, I'm going to recall all the Singaporeans overseas to come back home. Because at that point, Singapore was actually had the lowest rates. That changed at some point, but it said, let's bring everyone home, safer at home. So whoever returned to Singapore, my sister spent 2 weeks at a hotel, I believe, paid for by the government, with packaged food, every meal paid for by the government, and they felt safe and they felt fed. And after 2 weeks of quarantine, they returned back to society. That's such an amazing thing to do, right? That the Singapore government could do that. We had some downsides too in Singapore where they missed migrant workers who were working in Singapore. They missed a few cases, which rocketed to 700 over cases within a week, right? And so again, this tells you that even if you have a low rate of incidence, if you're not careful, the spikes can be exponential.
Yeah, you could have hotspots in that area where people are close together. Like, all these breakouts in church congregations where you have one person and all of a sudden,
Korea,
you have a high number of cases.
So I think that it's very easy to be lulled into a sense of security. It's just, so I think having this system, like in Singapore, having the systems of contact tracing, mass testing, and really leadership at the very, very top are very, very coordinated, right? And whatever, and very thoughtful. They're not reacting. They're not hand waving away potential solutions. They're being very open-minded about what they can do, right? And also not egotistical, right? They don't go, well, we only want to use solutions that are in Singapore, drugs made in Singapore. No, they go, whatever works all around the world, we will go out there and acquire it, collaborate to get it, or bargain for it, and because people's safety comes first.
Yeah, you used the word. I've got to tell you, a couple of things come to mind about you. One is I saw your meaning of life on YouTube, and I want to tell you, I absolutely fell in love with that. I've sent it to like 5 or 6 friends.
Thank you. Yeah.
His meaning of life YouTube video.
Where is it? It's on.
I just say that everyone should. Jean, it's quite wonderful to hear you talk about that leadership, and you brought up leadership several times. And I'm going to use my language as binary to the scientific research that's being done. You cannot have the scientific research being done without the kind of thoughtful leadership you're talking about at the top.
Right.
And so. And again, I go back to your meaning of life, a video on YouTube, which again, I've sent it to so many people.
Thank you.
But one quick question here before our time is over. How is this a game changer? How does this redefine the scientific community in respect to this global ecosystem collaboration in research? Does it flow over to other research, and is it permanent? Because oftentimes when we go back to the Nobel Prize is usually given to an individual, or is given to, and here what you're talking about is really, and it seems to Steve's point, that you guys pivoted quite quickly to say, okay, this is not about a siloed approach. This is about a collaboration. Is this a redefinition of scientific research, or how scientists will work, not only on this virus, but how scientists will approach their work, whether it's the virus or cancer, whatever it may be?
Yeah. I do not think that we are reinventing anything novel here. I think scientists would argue that collaboration is always key, and I think competition at the same time is very healthy, because that's how you actually develop novel technologies, right? I do think that this, my father used to tell me, right, and remind me as a kid that emergencies.
Oh no.
Oh, the cliffhanger. Hold on, you froze. We want to hear it.
You froze in emergencies. Your father used to tell you that emergencies.
Are we frozen?
Yeah, you're froze again. There you are.
Are we okay?
Yeah, your father used to tell you, pick up from there.
Yeah, he used to say that harsh situations and harsh environments really reveal, true leadership, and true, thoughtfulness, right? And I think she disagrees with me, I guess, but I think that's true, right? I think that what this has done is really, this COVID situation has really shown us, what we've realized is there are people that will selflessly act to improve their situation and everyone else's situation right now. Like, you can sort of see people emerge, right? There are groups of people that will go, okay, whatever it takes, let's just do it. Let's get things done. Let's, save as much as, and then there are others that will stick to, well, my job is to make sure that things are done a particular way, which is fine. But I think emergencies require a different thought, a different process, and a different adaptation, right? This is how organisms survive. When you have, climate change, dinosaurs disappeared, but we survived, right? So mammals for the most part survive. And I think every time there's what we call a large shock to the system, the adaptive variants will actually be selected for. But so I actually think that what this is selected for are folks that are very happy to collaborate widely. Don't worry about boundaries. Do not look at things as competitive, at least locally, right? And trying to get things moving, whether or not it's in their own best interests. Yeah.
I think they're getting.
I'm glad
you're gonna get hungry.
Well, we should probably end right there, because that's a fantastic ending. But I just wanted to know, what do you think about a resurgence in the fall?
Oh yeah, we are very worried about that. And I think as the weather gets colder, that will be a bit of an issue. Yeah, no, we are very concerned about that. But it's, again, I think is the best you can do is I would argue, keep an open mind, keep looking for new technologies. I always believe, at least maybe naively, that science, with the right deployment, political or vision, right, in deploying the right technology, will always save the day, right? So that's at least my bias there, right? And I think this is where people that are in ethics, people that have thought about law deeply, right, those can help us think about the best way to deploy science. And as scientists, we should just keep building the best technologies to help everybody else. She's like trying to do they're funny. They would lift their hands or lift their legs and just like stay stuck in that position.
Yeah, there's Supergirl pose.
Yeah, they do that.
Like kitties.
Yeah.
Very strange. Yeah.
Well, hopefully, we'll have some vaccines coming out soon, and that should be able to eliminate some of the worries,
some of the concerns.
Yeah.
Has this shifted you as a scientist? Are you now different because your parents than you were? Is your approach to your scientific work different at all?
I don't think, at least for me, I don't think my approach has been different. I do think that, I at least perspective-wise, right? It sort of made me realize that solving future problems, forecasting problems, is sometimes more important than trying to solve immediate ones. Because we might solve an immediate solution good for us, but not great for our kids.
Got it.
Right.
How about you, Mom? Has it changed your approach to scientific work at all?
I don't think so, but an interesting side thing. So I study epigenetics. So these two have the same genetics, and they had, I would argue, very similar epigenetics in utero. So now I'm sort of interested in how their epigenetics are changing.
She wants to do experiments on them.
So yeah, I wanted to experiment on the twins. Yeah,
Don't let her do it, Jean. Don't let her do it.
Yeah.
We posed an interesting question to our Facebook community, whether they believe that these two are biological replicates or technical replicates.
Well, that's over my head.
Well, so Jean, I'm going to go to the emotional part of you. For those of you, I'm going to say it again, I've said it 3 times. For those of you who've not seen Jean's video on YouTube, The Meaning of Life, it's about 3 minutes, and it's 3 wonderfully insightful minutes about not just this man as a scientist, but who he is as a human being, and certainly who his partner is as a human being. And your measure of empathy, your measure of belonging to the world, Jean, as a brilliant scientist, both you and your wife, is something for everybody to really be, so happy that people like you on the planet doing the work you do with the empathy that you bring to the work you do. So I just really want to say that.
Alexis, that's very kind. Thank you so much. And Steve and Amanda for setting this up and hosting us today. It's been a pleasure. Sorry we are a bit distracted, but thanks for the flexibility as well. Okay.
Oh, you bet. Any last thoughts, Steve, before we jump off?
Well, actually, I think my father died of pancreatic cancer, so I would like you to hurry to a cure.
Yes, we're working on it.
You're doing 2 of the most important things, on the universe, really. So Godspeed, if we believe in that sort of thing.
Thank you. Thank you, guys.
Yeah, thank you for having us on and for having them on.
You were both so well worth the wait. I know that we tried to get Jean on
this is better.
It's 5 weeks, right?
Yeah.
So this is better. We got the whole package. So we really look forward to following your journey.
Thank you.
And to just seeing how everything unfolds. We missed you, seeing you at the cafe. I want to hold those babies.
Yeah. Hopefully we can come soon and introduce them in person.
Amanda, we need babysitters.
I know. I think I'm just going to pivot. I was telling Leo, there's no summer camps. We're just going to pivot, and Bella Vista is going to reopen as an outdoor summer camp.
Exactly. Bring on the kids.
There's always a solution. So I also want to let you guys know that Catriona Jameson is going to be coming on tonight at 5. So she's also a leader on the Mesa, and she'll be speaking about her perspectives and everything that's going on. Jean, are you guys part of this group that's doing the Return to Learn for UCSD?
We are doing the pilot with the clinical labs in the Return to Learn. We will be working on building up more resources to enable also not just the undergrads to return to learn, everybody else. And I'm particularly motivated to make sure all the healthcare workers, including actually doulas and nurses and the firemen and the police, right, are also frequently tested. So we are working on that. Yeah.
Perfect. So it'd be great if perhaps, we get you back on a few other segments, check-ins and updates, and then we can follow your guys' journey, because Bella V TV is here to stay.
Sure.
Great.
Perfect.
All right.
Thank you.
Bella V TV on YouTube. Thank you. They have things to do.
Thanks.
All right. We'll see you soon.